From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun next to me, as he does each and every podcast, Andre Johnson Jr. Do not forget the Junior.
Please
Before we
don't.
get into today's fire content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe notification so you get subscribe button to get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. We are here. It is Monday, another busy sports week ahead here in the city of New Orleans. It's also draft week, and this is a week for a guy like myself to really, I guess you could say, step to the forefront, if you will, because there's a lot of things come together this week. There's a lot of excitement leading up to this week. So we're going to go there today with this Monday, but before Monday, we had a nice weekend. We're back. How was your weekend this weekend?
You know, it would have been a little nicer if C.J. McCollum made that three at the end of the Pelicans game yesterday, but you know what? We're moving on. Otherwise, great weekend. Had some nice weather. It was a good one.
Yeah, I thought it was going to rain a lot more yesterday. It ended up not doing that, so I was able to wash my car. I got some stuff done around the house. It was a good weekend, and I watched basketball all day, including into the night where the Pelicans came up short. Let's just leave it at that. Yeah. So, anyway, let's move on to this Monday, and it is Mock Draft Monday. Fazan's Mock Draft 2.0. A lot of names on this list you have heard before. Some others you have not. But nonetheless, it's the perfect time to do it. I always do at least 2 mock drafts, and this is version 2.0. So, Andre, that, my friend, is our big picture today.
Yeah, and a lot of Saints fans, I think, are going to be excited about this one, especially the way that this one's going to start. Reminding those watching, the Saints have 9 draft picks this year, 1 first, 1 second, 4 fifth rounders, 2 sixths, and a 7th rounder. So with this mock draft 2.0, we released 1.0 a couple weeks ago. We're going to start with pick. Now, this is assuming no trades happen.
Yeah,
obviously.
again, no trades in this one.
We're taking the picks as they are right now that the Saints have. Round 1, pick 14. The New Orleans Saints are on the clock, and Sean Fazende, they select.
I promised you guys a version of this. I promised you guys a version of where I would make this work, where the Saints would fulfill needs, but also get with many people, with many in the fan base, is the player that a lot have fallen in love with. A lot of people just feel like he is a fantastic football player, could be a playmaker, a game changer on the Saints offense. By now you figured it out. It is Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. We talked about him a lot. He is a little bit undersized for a tight end, but that is okay. He catches the ball. He's got run after catch ability. He runs like a running back with the ball in his hands, which is why you saw him doing so many end arounds and jet sweeps for a tight end at the University of Georgia. He is a playmaker, and we've said this many a times. We've had this discussion, at least 2 or 3 different pods on Brock Bowers, but the Saints have not had a game changer at that position since Jimmy Graham the first time around. So this position is one that's been lacking over the years. It's a position where perhaps maybe it's been slept on a little bit just in terms of what it could add potentially to your offense. They've tried to add this at this position, but never this high. I don't think in franchise history ever this high. Pick 14, Brock Bowers is the guy in mock draft 2.0. I understand I'm bypassing a tackle here, but I will address it later. Trust me. But Brock Bowers is the pick. What say you?
It leads me to one of the most interesting stats from the Saints last season, and I've mentioned it before. Last time we talked about Brock Bowers, I mentioned it. Leaving Taysom out of it, because Taysom lines up in so many different places on that Saints offense. The Saints tight ends had the 7th fewest yards in the league by that position. The San Francisco 49ers, which is where your offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, came from, the 7th most yards by a tight end at that position. So the tight end position is a place that the Saints not only lacked last year, as you alluded to, they've really been lacking for years to come. And last year, a lot of people thought maybe Jaren Johnson would take that step forward. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, that didn't happen. And when you look at a Brock Bowers, whose game is built for the Clint Kubiak offense, he could be one of very few elite tight ends in the league, because if you really think about that tier 1, that game changer label at tight end, you've got Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, George Kittle. You can throw Sam Laporta in there. what's that, 5 guys? Maybe Evan Ingram from the Jaguars.
Yeah, that's about it.
There's not a lot of game changers at that position. So if the Saints have an opportunity to get a guy who's seen as by far and away the best tight end in this class, 105, 3 years at Georgia, 105 receptions, 2,538 yards, 31 total touchdowns. I say total touchdowns because he had 5 rushing touchdowns. The versatility is there. The run after the catch is there. And the need for the Saints, if this guy falls that low, it's there, Sean.
It's been there. And look, we've talked about it. We've debated it. And based off what the reaction we got from all of you, and feel free to leave some comments down below, the overwhelming majority of people are okay with this. They're okay with adding a game-breaking, game-changing tight end, a unique tight end. Like I said, it's hard to find a tight end where the best quality is run after catch. I mean, normally you have these high flyers or whatever the case may be, but his ability when the ball is in his hands after a catch to break tackles and move and run and find lanes is special. And he's a game breaker. And Georgia had some beasts. Let's be real. I mean, that was a team full of blue chips everywhere, and this guy stood out every single year on national championship teams and everything else. I know he got hurt a little bit last year, but he's healthy now. I am rolling with Brock Bowers. I should mention in the last mock, I had Olu Fashanu, the tackle out of Penn State. Still like him, and I still think that's probably where they're going to lean at some point, but for this mock, it's Brock Bowers. What's next?
As we go to round 2, pick 45, you mentioned that, we talked about offensive tackle being the #1 need. We didn't get it in the first round. So are we looking on that offensive line in round 2 of this mock draft?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. I've promised you guys this. If they ever went away from the tackle position in round 1, it is a guarantee they're getting one in round 2. And not only round 2, they're probably moving up to get that tackle in round 2 just to not leave themselves vulnerable. But like we said, for this mock draft, we're not going to deal with trades. It just gets too complicated and it gets kind of messy. So round 2, pick 45. I'm going with Jordan Morgan, tackle out of Arizona. We did a second round prospect pod a few weeks ago on possible second round availability tackles. Jordan Morgan was one of my favorite players. He had great balance, great fluidity, moving right to left. He plays the left tackle position for most of the time. Good in the run game as well. Moves well to the second level. His issue, he's not very long. He's got short arms, which I know can turn off a lot of people. But if he's got agility and movement skills and he's able to be solid and pass pro with the way this offense intends to look, I think you can overcome just a lack of length when it comes to arm length. So Jordan Morgan was a guy I really keyed in on early in the draft process. When I say early, I'm talking about like around the Senior Bowl because, you start doing your research. So it was one of the guys that I really started to kind of watch quite a bit. They may have to go up a couple of spots to get him, but I do think if you somehow end up your first 2 picks are Brock Bowers and Jordan Morgan, you got a game breaker and your biggest need filled. I think I would be very, very okay with this. So I'm going with Jordan Morgan out of Arizona at pick 45.
You mentioned overcoming, shorter arms. Another thing he overcame was injury. He tore his ACL in 2022, came back in 2023, and he was first team Pac-12. And the Pac-12 was a pretty stacked conference from top to bottom.
That was a good year
season.
for Pac-12. Yes.
He's athletic. He's got fast hands. Scouts believe he could get stronger, but that's something that's more on the easier side to work on if you're an offensive lineman.
Absolutely.
Only allowed 2 sacks last year in pass protection. He excels as a run blocker, and he fits the Saints' #1 need, which ever since the news about Ryan Ramczyk potentially missing the entire season has been offensive tackle. So he gives you that while still, in this mock draft, getting a playmaker, a potentially transcendent tight end in round 1.
Should also mention last mock was Braden Fisk, the D tackle out of Florida State. I still like that pick, but nonetheless, for this combination, I'm going Jordan Morgan. All right, let's skip rounds 3 and 4 because the Saints don't have any picks and go right to round 5. Yes, what's next?
That huge leap from round 2 to round 5, from pick 45 all the way down to 150, where the Saints select next in the 5th round, and Sean Fazende, that selection is.
It's a repeat from last one, but it's a different spot. It's Jaren Jones, cornerback out of Florida State. He is a nickel. He can play outside. He can play inside. Scrappy guy, got good length for a corner or a nickel, and he's a guy that, again, the Florida State program produced a lot of athletes. He really stood out. He was a very good football player. You can certainly add some depth to that secondary. Now, why did I flip? Because last time I had him at 168, their next 5th round pick. But why did I put him at 150? Well, it's easy because as the weeks have gone on, you're starting to see him creep up a little bit to the point where maybe even 150 is a little late in the process to get a Jaren Jones. So they may have to trade up, which at some point we think they're going to trade up on day 3 anyway with all these backloaded day 3 picks beyond round 5. But nonetheless, for this purpose, for this current mock draft, we're going to go Jaren Jones, cornerback out of Florida State, the corner/nickel, who I think can be a decent player in this league.
At times, I roll my eyes at the NFL Combine because a lot of these players have years of film added up. But the Combine is actually something that helped Jaren Jones a lot. He was at or near the top in pretty much every metric, 40-yard dash, broad jump, vertical. And when he did that, his draft stock, it started to go up. He ran a 4.38, the 5th fastest among all DBs. And he really, especially as he looks to transition into the NFL, he's seen as a guy who could excel in that nickelback position. And when you talk about a nickelback, you look at the Saints corners and there's a bit of a spot for that.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Paulson Adebo, you've got Alontae Taylor, but a guy who I believe was one of the 3 to 5 best players on the defense last year, very underrated, in Isaac Yiadom, he's gone. He's in San Francisco. And he played a big role in that Saints secondary, and now that spot is empty. So you're looking for a guy with a lot of athleticism who can play that nickelback to step in and potentially contribute early. Jaren Jones could be that guy.
I like it. I think it's a good pick. I think it's, in DA is a natural. His first love on the football field is defensive backfield. At his heart, he is a DB coach. So I like the investment there. What do we have next?
Up next, we're going from pick 150 to 168, still in the 5th round. This is their second of 4 picks. Who we got?
Okay, so this is another repeat, but I flipped the order. It's tackle from Pitt, Matt Calvis. He's a guy that we spoke about last time we did this mock about 3 weeks ago. He's a guy that probably would be a day 2 selection had he not hurt himself last year and missed the last 8 or 9 games of the season. Again, he's a guy that I like his nastiness on the offensive line. I like the way he moves. I like his physicality. He's not the quickest guy in the world, but I think he's a guy that can give you some solid depth along that offensive line up front. We know they need depth. We know they need more than one tackle. You need as many bodies as you can get up front because you don't know how this thing's going to sort out. And he's a guy that played in a program that's a legitimate program, and certainly he's had some success there. I had him at 150 in the last draft, and Jones at 168. I just simply flipped them because, as you just kind of get a feel for everything, I felt like that was a spot I could make a slight adjustment in my picks to get both those guys, but also maybe tweak the order based off what it felt like, how it's been heating up with certain prospects. Calvis is a guy that I think could come in, could battle. Maybe he's a starter. Maybe he's not. Maybe he just adds depth. But I like the resume. I liked what he showed on film. I think it's a very solid day 3 selection along the offensive line for the Saints.
He definitely feels a need because the biggest thing to me about Matt Calvis is he's got experience at both tackles. He's played left tackle and he's played right tackle. And right now there's a question mark for the Saints at both of those positions. Yeah. And it was interesting to me, a lot of times during the draft, these guys who are coming out get player comps, player comparisons, guys who are in the league who remind these scouts of the players that are coming out right now. One of the most common player comps I saw for him was Nick Saldiveri, a player who the Saints spent a mid-round draft pick on last season. Now, Nick Saldiveri was a healthy scratch in a lot of games. We really didn't get to see him play very often, but he is a guy who Dennis Allen and his staff looked at and said, I think he can help us at one point. So to draft a similar player in Calvis, who Saldiveri is more of an interior guy, Calvis has experience playing the outside, I think it's a very interesting pick, and it would be very niche of the Saints to do so.
Wouldn't have a problem with it. Their next pick is not much later at
170.
Okay, so
2 picks later.
In the 5th round.
It's a guy who a lot of Louisiana fans
All
may
right,
be
I think I might
with.
like this one. Again, I think defensive tackle is probably a bigger need, at least from a depth standpoint, that perhaps we're leading on, or perhaps we've been talking about. I'm going Makai Wingo, defensive tackle out of LSU. I know Mason Smith probably is the higher prospect because he has a higher ceiling. He's a little bit more intriguing, but to me, he underachieved at LSU. He got hurt in 2022 in game 1. 2023, he came back. They thought he was going to be a beast. He wasn't at all along. this guy, Makai Wingo, comes in. He spent his first year at Missouri. Is that correct?
Yes.
First year at Missouri, and he's been nothing but reliable, durable, a little undersized at 6 foot, but his player comp was Sheldon Rankins, a guy we saw quite a bit here in New Orleans. He was a first-round pick back in 2016. Was a steady player when he wasn't injured, but I like Wingo's quickness. He's stout. He's reliable. He's productive. He's not afraid to do the ugly work, the dirty work. He's a grittier player. As a smaller D tackle, you got to be scrappy. You have to be scrappy. And look, LSU's defense took a beating the last couple of seasons, but I felt like he was arguably the most consistent player week in and week out for not just one, but probably 2 seasons. And again, they have a need at defensive tackle to kind of add to that rotation because it's a vulnerable spot when it comes to injury. They invested in one last year, and obviously Brian Brzee high. But I think this guy can be a solid 3-technique player at the next level. And if he keeps that same mindset of not minding doing the dirty work, I think he'll do all right. So Makai Wingo is my 5th-round pick at pick 170 out of LSU for the Saints.
And you mentioned his quickness. The guy ran a 4.8 40-yard dash. That's the second fastest among all defensive tackles. That's athleticism for a big guy. He's a good run stopper, but he also had 8.5 sacks in his collegiate career. Now, he was injured in 2023. He came back and played the bowl game.
Yeah.
A lot of people,
right,
if they're dealing with an injury, they're not going to risk playing that bowl game, but that shows how dedicated Makai Wingo was to that LSU team, and that goes a long way for a lot of people. And before anybody starts to question his durability, he played an NCAA best 821 snaps the year prior.
Say it again.
In 22. NCAA best. That means the most in all of college football, 821 snaps. So don't question this guy's durability because he's shown that he can get out there and produce on a consistent basis. I think that defensive tackle, we talked about how stacked the defensive end room is for the Saints. But when you look at DT, you got Brian Brzee. And then after Brzee, obviously Brzee's going to play, but you've got Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard, 2 veterans who did contribute last year, but is there room for a young guy to come in and push them? Absolutely.
Absolutely. And this is a nice value pick at 170 in the 5th round. So Makai Wingo is a pick. I should add that last mock draft I had TCU tight end Jared Wiley at this selection. I have now looked at mock drafts about him. He's starting to move up. He's starting to move up quite a bit, Jared Wiley. So, yeah, 170, Makai Wingo, D tackle out of LSU. What's next?
Up next, the last 5th round pick that the New Orleans Saints have, that would be pick 175. We're finally almost out of the 5th round, Sean. How are we getting up out of here?
That's another repeat, but once again, it's a different spot because you're starting to hear his name a little bit. It's getting a little bit, his name's kind of getting hotter, if you will. Curtis Jacobs, linebacker out of Penn State. We've said it before. We'll say it again. He's got great speed, sideline to sideline, does well enough as a cover linebacker, and covering in the NFL from linebackers is hard to find. It's hard to find guys that are natural cover linebackers. He does it well enough. He's a little slow when it comes to read and recognizing when it comes to run plays, and that's why he always seems a little bit of a step late when it comes to run plays, but he's got great sideline to sideline range and athleticism. If he can get better at pre-snap recognition to allow him to be basically a step ahead on a run play, he could become a good player with that kind of athleticism, that kind of sideline to sideline range, that kind of just like I said, just athleticism on the football field. So to me, he was a guy that was productive at Penn State. And like I've always said this, in the Big Ten, you see things in the Big Ten you don't see anywhere else that translate to the NFL. And there are certain things you see, in particular in the run game. So Curtis Jacobs at 175, that is the pick for the Saints, the linebacker out of Penn State.
And when you watch him, the one word that comes to mind is explosive. And the good thing about that is he's going to have a lot of time to sit, if he were drafted to the Saints, to sit and really learn. Obviously, he's got the athleticism. There's a little bit mentally and physically he could still learn, but he's got room to do that because the Saints have DeMario Davis. The Saints have Pete Werner. The Saints just signed Willie Gay Jr. So that's 3 veteran guys that are in front of you. You're probably not anybody drafted at linebacker, at least at that linebacker position, is not going to come in and play immediately. So you've got time to sit and learn behind 3 guys who are a wealth of NFL knowledge.
And as you're sitting and learning, get on the field and special teams. Do the work, do some work on special teams, which is a lot of reserve linebackers do. And you can carve out a nice little kind of area, a nice little lane for yourself with this franchise. All right. What we got next?
This is where it gets fun. You mentioned this pick to me earlier, and at first when I was looking at him, I was like, I don't see it. And then I kept looking, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. First pick of the 6th round, pick 190. Who are we looking at?
All right, I like this guy, especially as a late pick like this. I'm going Tyrone Tracy Jr., the running back out of Purdue. This guy's got a very unique story. First off, 6 years of college football. He had the COVID year plus a redshirt year. 6 years of college football, so he's played a lot of football. But for 3 or 4 of those seasons, he was a wide receiver at the University of Iowa. Then he transferred into Purdue. At some point, they converted him to a linebacker for Purdue, and last year he had 113 carries, 716 yards. His first year playing full-time running back, 8 touchdowns, 6.3 yards per carry, while also being not just a running back to have as the lineup at wide receiver. No, he was a full-time wide receiver for 3 seasons at the University of Iowa. So he's a guy that understands splits, coverages, and he became a running back, runs the outside zone, runs the inside zone. He's a long strider. So when you watch him run, it doesn't always look like he's running fast because of those long strides, but he ran a 4.4 840. To have that kind of production in your first full season at running back, that was impressive. And I can't help but make the connection. Yes, this is a stretch. But when you talk about a running back / wide receiver, and who was the #1 player that did that in the NFL last year?
Christian McCaffrey.
Who else? Debo Samuel, a guy, Debo Samuel, who is at San Francisco, a guy that can do running back snaps, wide receiver snaps. Tyrone Tracy Jr., I'm not saying he's going to be Debo Samuel, but the guy that has to have that kind of skill set at those 2 positions, which is not as easy to convert as you might think, I think that's impressive. And at pick 190, versatility, I like the Tyrone Tracy selection, especially with this offense coming next year for the Saints.
Versatility is the word when you talk about Tyrone Tracy Jr., because when I looked at his numbers, when you mentioned him earlier, I was like, running back, pretty good year last season. But before that, he didn't have many rushing yards. So I turned on the tape. I started watching some highlights of him, and I'm watching him in Iowa, and I'm seeing him run like legitimate routes. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't a running back out the backfield. This guy's lined up wide. This is a wide receiver.
Yeah.
So versatility is the word when you talk about Tyrone Tracy, because he's played wide receivers for several years. For a guy in his first full-time gig at running back last season, 716 yards, 8 touchdowns, over 6 yards a carry. That's phenomenal as a running back. And then you got to also consider he plays special teams too, Sean.
Yeah,
a 98-yard return touchdown last season for the Boilermakers. So this is a guy, and you talk about versatility in that Saints offense and in what Clinton Kubiak looks to do. You look at the starter, Alvin Kamara, a guy who's been one of the most versatile backs in the NFL for the last few years. I think Tyrone Tracy Jr. could stand to learn a lot from AK. I think that all of the things that he can do would fit perfectly into what the Saints are looking for. Tyrone Tracy, a guy who can do it all, that would be a really fun pick for the Saints.
And just think about this. Your design, from a scheme standpoint, how much a guy like this can help you. Because, look, Alvin's a very versatile player, but when he lines up on the line of scrimmages in the receiver area, he's going to run either a curl, he's going to maybe run a little slant, or maybe he'll run a wheel route. But this guy knows the entire route tree, like front, back, all of it. Go up the field, across the field, whatever the case may be. And when you have a guy like that with that kind of position flexibility, how do you cover that guy? How do you treat that guy? And that dictates matchups to the defense in terms of how you want to play that guy, which can open up things for other people. Now, look, it's a 6th-round pick, so we'll see, how far he can go. But to have that kind of skill set and those kind of tools in your toolbox, to me, I think that's if he's available this late, I think this guy, Tyrone Tracy Jr. can be a nice selection for the Saints. Great value here in the 6th round.
Also ran a 4.4 840, so the guy's got athleticism.
Absolutely.
Now, we've got one more pick in the 6th round. Pick 199. We got 2 more left in this draft for the Saints. This is the second to last. Where we going?
All right, it's another repeat, but it's another versatile guy. It's Utah safety Sayone Vea. We talked about him last time because he's not just a safety. He was also the Utah running back who had over 400 yards rushing last year and played full-time safety. He's a guy, he's going to play the underneath zone. He's a down box safety when it comes to coverage. He's not a great man safety. He's not going to play the deep half very much, but he's going to be down in the box. He's going to cover those underneath zones. He's got great read and react skills when he sees something dart out into the flat area. He's got a very short tackler from the safety position. He can blitz as well. He can give you some scheme flexibility and give you some position flexibility and what he's able to do. And we talk about wide receiver, running back being difficult to mimic those be able to master both those positions. Could you imagine safety and running back at the Pac-12 level? So Sayone Vea was a guy we talked a lot about in the last mock draft. All those qualities are still there. The only thing is I had him at 199 instead of 190 like I had him last time. So this one I have him at 199. So if they can grab Sayone Vea, this is a very interesting selection that I think the Saints could do a lot of things with.
Sayone Vea, he was a productive tackler in college, a big hitter. There's room for him with the Saints because Marcus May is gone. So there is a gap at safety, and obviously Jordan Howden's probably going to be at the top of that list to fill it, but there will be a little bit of a competition there, I'd expect. And Sayone Vea, I mentioned it in the first mock draft, he reminds me of a guy who was drafted to Carolina a few years ago. Now, he was drafted much higher. I believe he was a first-round pick, but Shaq Thompson. Shaq Thompson's a guy who played running back and linebacker in college.
Yeah.
He transitions to full-time defense in the NFL, and he's been very effective for Carolina. One of the few players over there that does his job effectively, to be honest with you. So I see a little bit of him when I watch the tape of Sayone Vea.
Good player. No, look, he's not going to play running back at the next level, but I think he's a guy that can contribute, and I think he's another one. You're going to play special teams, and you're a reserve safety, reserve linebacker. Guess what? You're playing special teams if you want to make the final roster. So Sayone Vea is the pick 199 for the Saints. Who's next?
You mentioned playing special teams. Your last pick of the draft is a guy who is going to play special teams 100% of the time if he's picked.
Yes, I am sticking with my 7th-round selection from mock draft ago. I am going Iowa punter Tory Taylor. He's an older prospect, an Australian punter, but he's still younger than the second-year punter they have this year in Lou Hedley, and I've said it before, and I will say it again. Why shouldn't there be competition at that punter position? Hedley was okay. He wasn't great. Felt like the coaches were a little higher on him to us in the media than maybe he showed. When it came to exactly what he put out on tape on the field, it felt like there was more there from a field position standpoint, from a flipping the field standpoint. This guy, Tory Taylor, was amazing last year for Iowa because they had no offense. So he stood out.
Got a lot of practice.
He stood out. So he got a lot of work in. And here's the thing. I do a couple of these simulators. There were a couple, more than one. This was too late for Tory Taylor. Wow. This was too late at 239. Pick round 7, pick 239. Tory Taylor as punter was too late. I'm going to stick with it because I know there are teams that just do not draft specialists because they feel like they can get one in the undrafted ranks. So no kicker, no punter. But the Saints have shown they have drafted a punter before. They have drafted a kicker before. They should not be afraid of this, especially in the 7th round, especially of a guy that could easily win a competition for a 7th-round pick to give you that kind of, give you those kind of snaps, that kind of consistency, if you will, or that much of an upgrade, or at least the idea or the chance to do that. Don't be afraid. Pull the trigger. I like Tory Taylor, the punter out of Iowa.
Look, I'm all for the Australian punter battle. I'm very excited for the potential of one of those. He'll be 27 before his rookie year starts, but we're talking about a guy who shouldn't take any hits. So a 27-year-old punter isn't a big deal. And like you mentioned, he is younger.
Your rookie punter last year was 30.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you're getting younger by going with a 27-year-old.
The guy's got a huge leg. If anything, the one criticism, one of the few on Tory Taylor is his leg's almost too strong sometimes. He'll overkick his coverage, but I'd much rather a guy with a huge leg who has to learn to control it than a guy who can't get that kind of distance on his punt. So I say bring it on, the Australian punter battle, Tory Taylor versus Lou Hedley.
I love it. All right, so let's add it up. We got Brock Bowers, Jordan Morgan, Jaren Jones, Matt Calvis, Makai Wingo, Curtis Jacobs, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Sayone Vea, Tory Taylor. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 on offense. 1, 2, 3, 4 on defense, and 1 specialist. Those are your 9 selections. 4, 4, and 1 specialist. Now let's just remind everyone, we don't think they're going to end up with 9 picks.
Right.
I think there's going to be some trades, especially on day 3. There could be a trade back early, round 1 or round 2. I'm sure you saw Jeff Duncan's article over the weekend. Trading back it would make sense this year. We'll see if that happens. But if the board laid out like this, I kind of like that 9-player haul for the Saints.
I like it too because you're able to fill a lot of the needs on your roster, and you're able to get that guy, Brock Bowers, a guy could easily step in and be a top 10 tight end in the league the second he steps foot on NFL field.
All right, the good news is you don't have to wait much longer. You don't have to worry about these mock drafts anymore. I know they're fun to look at. I know they're fun to play on the simulator. I know they're I look them up, I guess, daily. I mean, I see all kind of mock drafts, and I read just about every single one of them. It's all educated guesses based off needs and conversations that these people have or that we have, and just doing our best to kind of, project where these players may go for the Saints. But this week, tomorrow, Mickey Loomis meets with the media, his annual pre-draft press conference. He always jokes with us that this is the press conference where he talks but says nothing because they're not trying to reveal a whole lot when they go into the draft. So Wednesday we'll wrap that up with some highlights from that press conference. And then Thursday, round 1, we are going to attempt to do a live stream on Thursday. It's going to be a late night for us. We're going to have to do we'll do our normal sportscast from 4, 5, 9, and 10. Then we'll do Final Bet Live, which will be a lot of basically a draft coverage type show. And then it'll be late night for us. We'll get back here probably about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and we'll do the live stream for about a half hour, 45 minutes, based off of who the Saints select in the first round of the draft. So the wait is almost over.
Just 3 more days, and we can finally go from talking about who the Saints will draft to do we like who they did draft?
Yeah, and I'm ready for that. I really am ready for that because that's when we get that and then we get them on the field, we can start really looking at them as professionals. Big week this week, my friend. Zurich Classic, if y'all getting out there. Pelicans playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. It's time to bounce back.
They were close.
They were close.
They were close against OKC. A lot went, they had the lead late. They were not able to hold it because of that awful possession where they missed like 4 shots. And, but they showed on the road they could hang with the number 1 overall team. If you're looking for a silver lining, they come back, I believe it's Wednesday, to play game 2. So it's still on the road where the Pelicans have excelled. You got to get game 2 because you don't want to come home where you struggled down 0-2.
I'm not in the mood for silver linings. Win the game. Win the game. This is not your typical 1 versus 8. All right. Anything else for us today?
Nope, we're good.
All right. That's going to do it for us today. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.